been 23 days since Sean Payton had his end-of-year press conference where he guaranteed us that the Denver Broncos would not drag things out with Russell Wilson, and yet here we are 23 days later. We still don't know, is Russell Wilson the quarterback of the future? We're going to dive into some more bizarre news that keeps breaking, rumors of really plugged-in people all around the NFL who all predict different places where he's going to land, but almost none of them are predicting he lands in Denver. Let's look at some of this news right now. So Shaun Alexander, who is a former just standout running back for Seattle. Do you remember when Seattle used to be in our division? I feel like when he first started playing there, he was on that Seattle team that used to be in our division. Thankfully, Seattle is no longer in our division because that was not a fun place to play. But Shaun Alexander hopped on the Kay Adams show. The interesting thing with Kay Adams is that I do feel like she is very plugged into Sean Payton. She was one of the first reporters to predict our hot streak and our 5-game winning streak, and she seems to be someone who has the ear of Sean Payton and gets information. So the fact that Shaun Alexander, who is very closely tied to Seattle, where all of Russ's dudes still are, Russell Wilson had a former coach who hosts a radio show there in Seattle, and that's the team that drafted him. He's got family and friends there, and so Shaun Alexander saying something is different than just some rando saying it. That if all of a sudden Terrell Davis came on and made a rumor about where he thought Javonte was, like Terrell Davis has a different level of access than just normal any NFL player to the Denver Broncos. So Shaun Alexander saying this, I think, has some credence. So Kay Adams on her show, Get Up, awesome show, or Up and Adams. Get Up is Stephen A. Smith. Horrible show. It's actually not horrible, but Kay Adams, Up and Adams, Shaun Alexander hopped on, talked about how he thought Russell Wilson and Sean Payton were a match made in heaven and all things were clicking. And then all of a sudden, Sean Payton decided that Russell couldn't run the offense he wanted, and he moved away from it. And at the end of this interview, Kay Adams asks, well, where's he going to go? And he says, I am hearing Atlanta, and then talks about why he thinks Atlanta would be a good fit. So to have, again, plugged in Broncos fan and Kay Adams, who is connected to this team and in its good graces and could call Broncos PR tomorrow, that's kind of a good sign. And then Shaun Alexander knows people who knows Russ, and so that is a very interesting take to hear him come out and say that the Falcons would be a good take. Interestingly enough, what we see here with the Falcons and why that could be a good move is the Falcons really seem to be like a quarterback away. They were competing for the division, and it really did seem like the only hole remaining on that team was a competent quarterback. They had Bijan Robinson, who's an incredible running back, drafted even higher than Jahmyr Gibbs from the Lions. They got Drake London from USC, that incredible wide receiver. They got Kyle Pitts, a great line, and it felt like they were just a piece away from actually winning that division. They fired their coach, and they ended up going with that new coach here. And I think it's in another tab, but Raheem Morris seemed to, in other interviews when was asked about Russ, seemed to like Russ. So that could be just a really interesting fit. And you just look here, that team seems a piece away. I have always liked Russell Wilson, but I do think he is dependent on having talent around him. He is not an elevator. I think there are 1 or 2 quarterbacks in the league who could make the playoffs with a garbage team. And I think everyone else is in the middle of that road where if you surround them with guys who can catch the ball and who can make things happen and outstanding in blocking, then they can do it. And I think Russ is in that second tier where surround him with talent and he can get it done. So crazily enough, you don't just have Shaun Alexander come out and say that. You have reporters at Sports Illustrated predict that in this article. And then this article on ESPN has all of the NFL insiders act as GMs and make their prediction on what they think is going to happen. And you look at those that are covering the Denver Broncos, and their prediction is that the Denver Broncos move on from Russell Wilson and that he ends up with, next line down, he ends up with the Atlanta Falcons. The good thing in this deal would be that by moving on, Atlanta would sign him to a 3-year, $36 million deal. And we have talked ad nauseum on this channel about how we do have offsets in place where depending on the contract he's signed to it makes us owe him less money going forward. So that very interesting. And then just the last piece of news here, Jeff Saturday, and again, he is more than just your typical former player. He's a former player who hosts a TV show, and on top of that, who was an NFL coach just last year. Remember, he was brought in, and so the level of access that he has is just totally different than just your everyday run-of-the-mill player. And again, my crazy thing about this one isn't that I necessarily think he's correct, but you just have another person reporting they think the Broncos move on from Russell Wilson. The question just becomes, once they move on from him, where does he end up? And Jeff Saturday came out and said he thinks that Russell Wilson ends up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So those are really your two candidates, the leading candidates right now for who ends up signing Russell Wilson to a future deal, and it would be the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Atlanta Falcons. So very curious to hear, how does that land with you all? Which team do you think is better set up for Russell Wilson's success? Will you continue cheering for him if he ends up on one of those teams? Do you think he has a better shot of going to the NFC South and playing with really a plethora of talent? But you're in Atlanta isn't one of your like purebred, just amazing division winners year after year after year. Whereas if he went to Pittsburgh Steelers, you got Mike Tomlin, who has never had a season where he's been below 500 in his entire coaching career, which is just like absolutely nuts to think about. And got a great wideout there. You have Najee Harris, and you just have a kind of a different playing style where you're not going to air it out. Your Ben Roethlisberger succeeded by hanging in the pocket, making something happen when the play broke down. Mike Tomlin is good just handing the ball off time and time again and letting somebody win it for you at the 2-minute warning in a close game. And I think Russell Wilson would step in and succeed in that. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens. I really hope that Sean Payton does exactly what he told us, which is this is not going to drag out. I know we're about a week away from the Super Bowl, and after that, I'm hoping that this train gets rolling, because truly what the Broncos do in the draft is, to me, all contingent upon what's going to happen with Russell Wilson. If he is clearly cut off this team, we're back on that quarterback carousel, and we need to figure out who is the guy in the draft we want to trade up and get. And if Russell Wilson opens his contract and renegotiates at a better deal, then awesome. Who is the best player out there who we can just design the offense around him and give him an absolute smorgasbord of talent so that he can Brock Purdy it and lead us back to the playoffs. So subscribe to this channel if you have not already. It's been an absolute pleasure bringing you Broncos news each and every day and my take on it. Thank you so much, and Broncos country, giddy up.